to Safe Inside, brought to you by TheraTribe. I'm Jeremy Loomis, and these are my conversations with Sandra Fields, an LPC and certified clinical trauma treatment provider with over 35 years' experience helping people who have been through trauma. Welcome back to Safe Inside. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Sandy.
Last time we finished our discussion about trauma and historical perspective, and we're going to start talking about the vagus nerve. This is going to take multiple parts to get through this topic, but let's start with what is the vagus nerve?
That's actually a really good question because we hear about it a lot anymore. If you're in any mental health apps, or if you are on TikTok or places like that, you'll hear the vagus nerve, and it's kind of interesting what it is. It's actually a big system within our nervous system, and it's a big part of our parasympathetic nervous system. That's a big word, I know, but that's our calm part of our nervous system. So when everything is okay, it's part of it. The vagus nerve, the name of it, vagus, literally means wandering. It's a vagrant all through all of our organs. It runs from our brain, and it works all the way down to our intestines and all the way within all of those things. So
it'd be useful to think of it almost as like a current running through a river.
It would be, with lots and lots of branches. It just wanders everywhere. Again, hence the name vagus, because it comes from the word vagrant. So it just wanders everywhere throughout. So yeah, like a river with lots and lots of tributaries and streams and creeks and all of those things, definitely. But again, it's the largest one in our body, the largest part of the nervous system. And it runs through everything, all the way down. No kidding. It's kind of interesting. Ever want to see it? Just kind of Google vagus nerve images, and it will bring up these great diagrams that are like, oh my goodness, all of that kind of runs through our bodies.
That probably is a good idea. If you're listening to this and you're not driving, you could search up an image at the same time as you're listening to this, and maybe start kind of putting the pieces together, like, oh, that's how one thing can affect these seemingly unrelated things elsewhere in your body.
Yes. And scientists believe at this point that that's probably the biggest piece of that mind-body connection. Yeah, that the vagus nerve really kind of regulates everything, and our stress plays a huge role on the vagus nerve. So stress, anxiety, trauma, all of it plays a large piece around our vagus nerve. So to give you an example of how that kind of functions, if we breathe slowly, that tells our vagus nerve feels the long expansion and the exhales, and it tells it that we are calm. And so it sends calming things to our heart, and our heart rate slows down. We've learned that it's the exhale that really does that, which is kind of interesting. But the most calming type of breath we learned is at about 6 breaths per minute. So it's about a 5-second inhale and about a 5-second exhale. That said, one of the cool things is that many of the meditations that we do, meditation chants and things, or even the rosary, actually brings us to a breathing of about 5 beats per second. I mean, yeah, 6 breaths per minute.
Oh, right.
So yes, if I could just speak a little bit, that would be great. But about 6 breaths per minute, about 5 seconds per inhale, and then 5 seconds per exhale. So it can just calm our system down pretty quickly. So it's kind of like, I like to think of the vagus nerve as kind of like a physical manifestation of our soul, because when people say trust your gut, what they're really telling you to do is trust your vagus nerve. Yeah, because it's getting billions of bits of data every second. And it's trying to tell you things all the time. And so that is our gut. That is our biggest nervous system in our body. So we might as well be aware of what it is.
There are a lot of, I hear a lot of people talk about feeling it in their gut. Like people, if they've experienced trauma, we'll start to ask them, where are you experiencing this in your body when you feel this way? And whether I'm hearing people speak in a context of spirituality or I'm hearing them speak about, just how they feel when they're experiencing things,
Mhm.
it seems like often enough people do kind of put their hand on their tummy. And
Yeah.
is that a hot spot for the vagus nerve?
Absolutely, it is. A lot of people don't know that about 70% of our serotonin is actually created in our guts. It's sometimes called the gut, the second brain, because of that, as well as we feel it pretty quickly there because of all of the part of the vagus nerve that reaches into our stomach, our intestines, and all of that. So there's a definite link to how where we feel. We feel it in our stomachs, we feel it in our guts. Sometimes we have things happen and we feel them almost physically, and it's our biggest nerve system actually responding to whatever is happening in our lives. And so, yes, we do. As I'm talking about it, I'm noticing I'm touching my gut, right? Which, is kind of funny that we do that. But yes, it's because that's where we feel it, you
Huh.
know? Yeah. So, there's a lot of science behind that. And by all means, I will encourage you if you're interested into it. I'm not going to go into it too much, mostly because I'm not a scientist. I'm a counselor, so there is that. But there are some things that we've learned about it that is very helpful for every one of us to know about this vagus nerve. What we know is when we are in a good place, when we're not stressed and everything is happy in our lives, or everything is okay, at least, right? Our vagus nerve, let me back up a little bit. I am going to do a little bit of science. We have sort of two sides of our vagus system. We have the front side, which is the ventral vagus. Ventral does mean front. And when that's activated or stimulated, we are in a good place. We're calm, our body's doing well, all of that. We have a back side or dorsal side. You'll see the dorsal vagus nerve or the dorsal vagus response. Think of the shark fin being a dorsal fin because it's on the back. That's all those words mean. Ventral means front, dorsal means back. And so when we are calm, we're in the ventral vagus side. When we are not calm, for whatever reason, anxiety, stress, trauma, any of those things, the dorsal vagal response happens. And that happens when we jump into our fight or flight mode. So I'm going to talk about what that looks like in your body, what that looks like in your feelings. And in this particular episode, we're going to talk about those things. And then in a future episode, we will eventually talk about how can you use your ventral vagus stimulation in order to calm yourself down.
Mm.
So I think that's the plan of where we're going to go with this.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way to lay it out.
Yeah. So when our ventral vagal system is activated, and that's again when we are in a good spot, we are socially engaging, we are curious, we're open minded, we tend to be more compassionate towards others because we have more capacity for that. We can be mindful in that space. That's where we get some joy sometimes. We're in the present, by the way, and we can be grounded because, as the title of a really good kids book, right, it's called Right Now, I Am Fine. And that's a good statement to say. Right now, in this present moment, we're both fine. Nothing's happening to either of us right now. We're talking, we're recording a podcast, but right now we're fine. So we're grounded and in the present. So that's kind of how we feel when our ventral vagus system is stimulated or activated. In my body, there are some physical responses because my nerve system is telling my body how to respond. For instance, my digestion is working well right now because I'm calm. I have intestinal motility. That means that things are working in my intestines the way they're supposed to, right? Their food is going in there. The nutrients are being brought out of the food. Any waste is being moved through the intestines in a normal fashion. The nerves are stimulating the intestines to work well. when we are in this state, our immune system is boosted, and we are in a good state. We have resistance to infection. We are less likely to catch a cold, catch the flu, anything like that, because our immune system is working properly. So our immune response to any of the germs and viruses and stuff is working well. We're able to actually rest and recover. I hear a lot nowadays about revenge bedtime, for instance. And this is where people, they know they should go to bed, but they spend 3 or 4 hours Netflixing, or is that actually a verb? Let's make it a verb. Or watching streaming TV, or laying around, and then they go to bed too late. They get up the next day. And really because they can't go to bed early. And really what's happening is they don't have time in the day to recover. And they don't, because they're running so hard, they don't have time for their ventral vagus nerve to do its job. And so they need this time to recover, because we really have to recover before we can actually rest. And so when our ventral vagus nerve is activated, we're able to recover throughout the day, and then we're able to rest when it's time for us to rest. It's also our circulation to like our non-vital organs is really healthy when our ventral vagus, it tells everything's fine. So our blood gets out to everywhere. We're not restricting it anywhere. All of our extremities, our fingers, our toes gets plenty of circulation. All of those things happen. Our oxytocin is a hormone that we hear about a lot in a different context. We typically hear about it as the bonding chemical or the bonding hormone that we produce when we've actually had an orgasm with someone that we love. That's typically how you hear about it, or that we like a lot. We hear about that in the news a lot because that's kind of, well, sexy, right? But we also produce it when our ventral vagus nerve is stimulated. We produce it even when we get hugs from people that we love, petting our animals that we love. Our oxytocin's like, oh, okay, hey, let me produce a lot. And we feel good and we can engage in life. So we're more likely to produce that oxytocin, or that good feeling bonding chemical in our lives. And because of that, we have a really good ability to relate to other people and to connect with other people. So we don't tend to isolate ourselves too much when we're in that ventral vagal response. So it's having it in that front place, or that ventral vagus nerve, having that stimulated, that is the ideal place that we want to be, right?
So let's say that you have one kid grows up in a very affectionate family, or even a very affectionate culture. Maybe it's not just in the home, but it's just normal everywhere that's familiar to them, for people to hug each other when they meet each other, or just things like that, for healthy affirming touch to be normal in their lives
Yes.
throughout each day. And then imagine another kid grows up where who knows why, that's just almost a thing to avoid. It's a thing that feels unnatural. Maybe you do it when you say goodbye after not seeing somebody for a long time. Maybe you do it at funerals, and that's about it. So what you're describing sounds like that could create something of a vacuum in that area of your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it can, our how we treat our ventral vagus system, it's like anything else in our body. If we don't use it and we don't keep it toned, is literally what we call it, toning the vagus nerve, it's going to do what everything else does. There's slippage. I think that's actually the word that they use. It becomes kind of out of shape.
Mm.
And if we don't raise our children with lots of, the stimulation for that vagus nerve, that front vagus nerve, then they don't grow up being able to use that in a way that's healthy and good. They have to learn to kind of get it back into shape, or get it into shape. I picture it literally like I do my own body tone. You know, if I spend a couple weeks out of exercise, when I come back to exercise at my age, I've lost a little bit and I have to work at it. You know, I have a good friend. We had lunch together yesterday, and her high school daughter was on their varsity soccer team. And over the summer in her traveling soccer team, she had hurt her leg. And so she was out for several weeks as it healed. So she played her first game this week. And after 20 minutes, she was winded because she hadn't been playing over the summer. She'll get it back quickly because she's young. But, you know, we were laughing about that yesterday. Our vagus nerve works the same way. So if we grow up in a house with a lot of neglect or with a lot of abuse, either one is going to set us up to have an untoned ventral vagus system and not really even understanding what that looks like. So we might not be able to know how to relate and connect to other people, for instance.
Mm.
We
It
might
is
grow
a
up.
bit different from what we tend to imagine normally.
Yeah,
We don't think about those things as something that we need to exercise.
absolutely. We really don't. And we don't think of that having such a huge piece of our mental health either, right?
I
We
think
can,
about I won't be able to rattle off the types of animals for which this is true, but I know I've seen people try to I've seen people try to get their pets to behave, to not like fight with each other when they're just playing anyways. But you look in the animal kingdom and like neurologically, in order to develop properly, like goats have to spar with each other, things like that. And it looks um like aggression if that's the lens you're viewing it through, but it's
Mhm.
literally them learning. It's literally them developing.
Yes, 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 absolutely it is. And it's part of figuring out conflict resolution. It's part of, that rupture and repair process in relationships that I think we've talked about. It's part of all of that. You are definitely right. Mhm,
It's stimulation, which is
mhm.
which is where that ties back. If it felt like a tangent, that's where that ties back to what we're
Yeah,
talking about today.
absolutely, absolutely. And so as we're talking about it, we're already going there. So let me move us on out of that what we the good area. Let us say that something stressful happens and we have that amygdala response that most of us know as the fight or flight response. We sort of see, it's kind of funny how we sort of see that fight or flight response as an all or nothing kind of thing when it's not actually true. Sometimes we're a little bit anxious. Sometimes we're a lot anxious. Sometimes we're a little bit triggered if we have trauma. Sometimes we're a lot triggered. It's actually kind of a gradation. So if you could picture like a bell curve kind of like shape. So we could be a little bit or a lot. The little bit would be more in that fight or flight area. So when that happens, we move from that ventral vagus system to the dorsal or the back vagus system. When we do that, we move from our parasympathetic nervous system, which is where we're good and happy, to our sympathetic nervous system, which is the one that goes into that fight or flight. We can do that with a little bit of anxiety or with a lot. So I want to say that as always with human beings, we're very complex and there's always a continuum, always a gradation, always those kinds of things. So it's important to remember that. But as we move into that dorsal vagal response. And this is where we might start showing some frustration. If I were wrestling around with my sibling and my sibling started to get aggressive towards me, as we were talking about. And so I might get really frustrated. Or I might become something may happen and I might start worrying or have a lot of concern. This is kind of at the beginning of that fight or flight response. It might continue to increase and I might become anxious, or that might even move into fear or even into panic. Or conversely, if I'm frustrated, that might continue to move up into irritation or anger or even rage within that. And so that's the flight part's going to be the worry, concern, anxiety, the fear, the panic. The fight part of response of that may look like that frustration, that irritation, that anger, that rage. Either one is still into that gradation. There is an effect on my body, just like there is an effect on my body for the ventral vagal system response. There is an effect on my body for that. As you might imagine, my blood pressure might start increasing a bit. My heart rate's going to start beating up because, like we talked about a few minutes ago, it's that ventral vagus nerve that tells my heart to slow down. The dorsal vagal, the receptors in there tell it to speed up because my breath is going to be a little bit shorter and not so calming and slow, right? So those lung expansion receptors tell the vagus nerve, okay, speed that heart up a little bit. My fuel availability, so like my nutrients, my glucose, all of those things, it's going to be ready to run away or to fight because my body's thinking that this is an actual physical threat, even though it may just all be internal in my mind. So my adrenaline dumps, and so everything starts to happen. When that adrenaline dumps, my cortisol dumps into my body, you can actually taste it. And so what I'm going to do is, I think, because this is still pretty intense, I think what we need to do, Jeremy, if it's all right, is kind of move and take this and put it to the next episode so that I can go more in depth with that.
Sure. So we kind of covered some definitions today and introduced the context of the vagus nerve. Let's go next time into how stress affects it, and that'll be kind of our focal point as we're making our way through this mini series. So join us next time for part 2 on our discussion of the vagus nerve.
All right, see you then.